Good evening, and welcome to Beyond Loaves and Fishes, a live stream Bible study. I'm Reverend Jeff Snyder, and I want to welcome you all here tonight to our continuing study of the book of Matthew. We're picking up on chapters 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to be covering a range of chapters tonight. We're starting with the Sermon on the Mount, and we're going to deal with a lot of issues from the Sermon on the Mount. Hi, Lisa. It's good to have you here tonight. I see by my list we have one more person than we've had before. We now have 16 subscribers, which is terrific. So whoever the new person is, we're really glad to have you with us. Oh, hello, Sherry. Good to have you both. So far, we've got two of our able Tuesday night folks from the National Night Out. We didn't broadcast last week because that's what we were doing. We were at the National Night Out representing Lansdowne Baptist Church to the Lansdowne community, and we had a great time. But now we're back, and we're ready to start again. We, if you recall last time, we read the Beatitudes, the blessings, who is blessed, and blessing is also another way of saying who's happy. So let's start with that. What brings you happiness? Think about that for a minute. What does our culture tell you is going to bring you happiness? Now that's a little different from what brings you happiness. These Beatitudes and the whole Sermon on the Mount stand the standard ideas we have on their ears. They make us think about things just a little bit differently, and not just our culture, but all of the way humanity behaves, all the way humanity gets along or doesn't with each other. So, blessed are the poor of spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, they'll receive mercy. Blessed are the pure of heart, blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed are those who mourn. That's not somebody you usually think of as being blessed or happy, but in this sense they are considered so. Hey, Cheney, hi to all of your family. It's really good to have you here. Society says money makes you happy. That's right. And if we know anything about that, we know that just isn't the way that Jesus saw it. In fact, he mentions you shouldn't put all your wealth into things that are basically going to rust away or rot or be stolen. And that really put things into a different sort of context than people are generally used to having. So when you think about these things, and what Jesus was saying, does it make you uneasy? Does it make you feel nervous in any way that he's suggesting that it would be a very different sort of things that will actually make you happy? So, but Jesus is going after where true happiness lies, where you can find deep joy, deep blessings. And he's saying this to people who are basically having rough lives anyway. And so this is going to be a comfort to people that don't have a lot of what society says you ought to have to get by. So you can see, well, where this might be a reassurance to these people. So this is a message of finding true happiness, deep joy, deep blessings for troubled people. And so this is an amazing sermon with which to kick off Jesus' ministry. Talk about an interesting way to start. Talk about really plunging in right at the beginning. So here we have Jesus up on the mountain, and he sits down to teach. This was a standard approach back in Jesus' day. In fact, it made me wonder when we switched from a teacher being a person who sits to a teacher as being someone who stands up behind a pulpit and speaks or preaches and teaches from there. I wonder where that transition took place and when. So Jesus went up on the mountain, And this has a great deal of significance for the people that are watching, because Moses also went up on the mountain. This is a parallel. So you have referencing to the Old Testament here for the Hebrew Christians who are watching and are paying attention. And they're impressed by this. This doesn't pass them by. And the disciples are in close to Jesus when he's up here lecturing and teaching on the mountainside. And those would be his intended audience, but the crowd is smart here. They gather in close and they take this opportunity to learn, which is a good example for all of us. It's always good to be able to learn when the opportunity comes, when you see somebody who has something that's valuable, get in there and listen. I wonder if we'd be willing to do the same today, or if we'd be too busy looking at our watch or our iPhones or whatever and saying, I don't have time for this. Would we be willing to stop on the mountainside, sit down for a while, be quiet? Or are we too preoccupied with other things that need to get done? It's a challenging question. It's an interesting idea. Is what would we do? How could we repeat this pattern of stopping, of breaking, and of sitting down and really considering what's going on? So I wonder if you would consider this. Perhaps this live stream is the digital mountaintop, and we're all sitting here together on the mountainside, pausing for a while to consider what Jesus has to say. Perhaps this is a way in which we are repeating that ancient pattern in a little different way, in a way that the original hearers and participants couldn't possibly have imagined. And we can do this. Our digital mountaintop can encompass the entire globe if we get down to it. That's an interesting thought. But this is a challenging message for all the hearers. Those who were converted to Christianity must have been very determined people, because Jesus is definitely going against the norms of society. He's definitely proposing a different way of living and a different way of being. And he's undermining all what you would consider the standard and assuring measures of success. They just aren't here in what Jesus has to say. So most of these hearers would have been common people, what you call people of the earth, perhaps. People with a limited education and a limited means. These were poor prospects for religious leaders who were seeking influence and power. These are not the folks you'd go to if you want to have a Cadillac ministry, you might say. Yet, these people were the first to hear the kingdom message of a new life and to accept it enthusiastically. So who are these people today? Who are the people of the earth right here and right now? That's something to consider in itself. And how do we reach them? How do we reach the common folks who aren't always included in society's idea of what it means to be involved in the success as society understands it? And Jesus emphasizes that the kingdom was to be lived out. It is to be walked and practiced in the fields and in the marketplaces. And I wonder if we do that. I had some friends from India who would say that we don't very much. We tend to package our faith on Sunday and leave it there and not use it the rest of the week. But Jesus is definitely encouraging that people to live out their kingdom values, to live out the life that he is recommending for them. And how could we take advantage of this guidance more as a people in the world around us? Where would we see the opportunities that we could do just that, as Jesus describes. Now, a word about blessings, again, from the Beatitudes here. This is the supreme blessedness, the exalted happiness. Jesus is giving a new definition of happiness itself, including those who mourn, those who are persecuted, those who are meek and merciful and seekers, the pure of heart, the peacemakers, those who are reviled for Jesus' sake. Happiness becomes more robust when you think of it this way. It's not dependent on your ephemeral emotions, on the fleeting emotions of the moment, or on a circumstance that you're having for an instant. We are all going to be happy when it's a hot summer day and we've got an ice cream cone or a lemonade or something like that. But that's ephemeral, that's temporary. This happiness is much more powerful and much more enduring because it can cover a wide range of circumstances. You can be cursed and still have this form of happiness, this form of blessing. And that's an interesting way to live. That's an interesting way to do things, I have to say. So, let's see what else we've got going on here. Okay. Now, Jesus broadens the laws and the conduct of the people. He makes them challenge their way of thinking. And he's taking them out beyond their normal, narrow definitions. He's not sticking to the little enclosures that the Pharisees and the Sadducees made for their people. And understandably made for their people. They kept them reined in because they were terrified that the people of Israel would stray again from God and they'd be put into exile once more. So you can understand why they might want to box them in. Jesus doesn't want to do that. He wants things to be much more expansive. Now we're going to go into chapter 5 a little further, verses 13 through 16. If you want to read along, that's where we are. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out or trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. I have to say that business about the lamp has special significance to us after yesterday with all the storms. You don't think much of a little lamp until it's storming outside and the lights are flickering inside, and you're very, very grateful for the candle that's not powered by electricity sitting in the middle of the room, so that if the lights do go out, you're not going to be left in total darkness. So there's an importance to little things, modest things like the lamp. But what's this business with salt? The saltiness. How can saltiness go out of salt? Well, for one, they're talking about sea salt rather than your pure salt. It's got a lot of impurities on it, and so it could actually lose a lot of its zest over time. And when it did, you pitched it out. You got rid of it. So, but we're called to be salt in a culture, and you only need a little bit of salt to flavor the entire meal. You only need a little bit of light in the darkness to be a guide to others. And in places where darkness seems to reign supreme, a little light will make a huge difference. Sometimes, of course, we don't want the light because we're hiding the things that we're doing. But Jesus says we need to be people of the light. So salt and light are very powerful. In fact, they're powerful out of proportion to their substance. A little light can provide a whole lot of illumination. A little salt can flavor a big dish. So be light, be salt. Jesus is pointing this out to us, that each of us are more powerful than we think. We're more like light and salt if we believe, if we choose to be. Now that's a very empowering thing. That's a lot of faith put on us by Jesus, saying, you are much more powerful people than you imagine. I know this to be true. You are salt. You are light. And the question is, the challenge for us is, do we believe that? And if we believe it, are we willing to act on it? Are we willing to be the salt? Are we willing to be the light? And if not, what is it exactly that's holding us back? What are we reluctant about? What are we afraid of? And that might be the way to put it. What are we afraid of in the world today? What keeps us from being light and from being salt? We're to be notable amongst other people, not in quantity, but in quality. We need to let that little light shine. It's like the woman I saw the other day, an 18-year-old who felt compelled to leave small notes on a bridge in her town where people were committing suicide. And she would leave little notes on the bridge, 40 of them, on the uprights along the railing, saying people are important. You are important. You're a significant person. Don't end it now. Your story will continue. And so far, she's saved 6 lives that she knows of. And the police have given her a commendation for her work of being light and of being salt. So, how can we demonstrate our discipleship better? To show others how hopeful and joyful following the Christian faith can really be. And do we believe that for ourselves? And are we willing to try it? A lot of times it boils down to being willing to live into your faith a little bit, and to see that basically you can do some of these things without negative consequences to you. And then you find yourself doing a little bit more. I had to do that when I started the invitation ministry, leaving invitations on people's doorknobs, going out into the community. And I had to get over the idea that maybe the community would be a hostile place. Maybe I would be unappreciated out in the community. But really, I've had wonderful experiences doing it. So sometimes we just have to try. Get out there and see what happens. Now, we're in chapter 5 still, but we're in verses 17 through 20. We're dealing with the laws and the prophets, inward thoughts and outward conduct. And Jesus says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a pen, which will pass from the law until it's accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Now, how's that for making a contentious statement? How's that for getting right into the middle of things? We're jumping a bit here and there. We're not going to cover each and every bit of the text. Otherwise, we would be in this book for a very long time until maybe I no longer had any hair. So we're not going to do that. We're jumping forward. So I encourage you to read everything, get the full scope of what's here. But for now, we're moving forward, covering as many bits and pieces as we can. Jesus comes to fulfill the law. He's responding to the Pharisees. The Pharisees were willing to trim the laws and the prophets to fit their own size and inclinations. But we are to be more than that. That's a pretty startling thing, as there was a lot of complaints that the Pharisees would tailor the law to fit their circumstances and to give them advantage and burden their people. Jesus says you can't do that. That's you'll be least in the kingdom of heaven if you try to tailor this to your own convenience. Can you think of any way in which that applies to the modern society we're living in right now? Can you think of any groups that try to tailor the scriptures to suit their own purposes rather than to live out the law as it was intended? So Jesus says he comes to fulfill the law, not to scrap bits and pieces of it. He extends Moses' law from simply an outward expression into an inward manifestation. He's talking when he talks about murder or about adultery here. He says he challenges us to think differently. You can sin in your mind, in your thinking. He says, I want you to think differently. And because if you think differently, you will be led to act differently as well. It's the challenge of a lifetime. It's not the challenge to be a Puritan, by the way. It's not the challenge to try to take the speck out of another person's eye and leave the log in your own. But it's the challenge to be different inwardly, because you get a transformation of yourself from the inside out. And so that we can impact the world around us in ways we might not have imagined to be possible. Now, think for yourself, consider just how you would do this practically. How does this, how do you affect your world? I can tell you one way in which it works for me, and Sherry worked on me on this. I used to get very angry at people on the road when they do something foolish. And I realized with Sherry's help that this was not healthy for me, and it changed my attitude on how I treated other people on the road. And so I changed inwardly. I started viewing them with more sympathy. So every time I saw somebody drive in an erratic way on the road, going past us in a quick pace, I imagined that one of two things. Either that person is getting to a hospital quickly because there's a loved one there that they need to see and they're distracted and they're driving, or two, one that I could sympathize with a lot sometimes is they had to pee real bad. And so they were driving erratically trying to get to the next rest stop. Either way, I diffused my own anger, and it changed the way that I treated others, and it certainly made the drive more pleasant for anybody who was in the car with me. So, like I said, though, it's the challenge of a lifetime. That's a small success, but there have been some failures along the way, too. We won't go into that. But Jesus calls us to turn the other cheek, to go the extra mile. And we can talk about how these were historical survival skills back in his day as well, because they were living amongst dangerous oppressors. So a Roman soldier could demand that you carry a pack a mile, but no more. Now, if you carry that pack 2, the power has gone to you instead of him. And they're less likely to do that to you if they know that you're going to go beyond what is required, because that puts them in an uncomfortable position. Turning the other cheek has a similar reference and a similar application. So, give to the poor, Jesus says. When we start to worry, if these are things that enable other people, maybe allow them to get away with things that maybe they shouldn't, Jesus challenges us there as well. Your business is to take care of your own soul, rather than to run your neighbor's life, which, of course, the Pharisees and the Sadducees did a whole lot of that. Do what is right with your resources, and leave it to your neighbor to handle his or her own. So don't judge others. And we're skipping around here a little bit. We're covering some other verses that I haven't read, like the law of love. Love is as indiscriminate and generous from God as sunshine or rain. It doesn't show preferences to nice people or nasty ones. So Jesus challenges us to be more equitable to all people, which is a real challenge. That's not something that's easily done. Yes, you're right, Lisa. People do try to manipulate and control people with their use of Scripture, something for their own benefit. Yeah, like women should be silent in church. I come from a long line of strong women. That one never went over in our family, ever. So, let's see. Moving into chapter 6, verses 1 through 6 now. Beware of practicing your piety before others, in order to be seen by them. For then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Phew! Don't misuse your religion for a quick gain. Don't use your religion to seek praise from others. Can you think of how we seek attention from others at times and can miss praise from the divine, praise from God when we do it? It's an interesting question. Jesus argues against the common knowledge, if you've got it, flaunt it. He doesn't believe in that mentality. Jesus' pattern for prayer is the Lord's Prayer, and it's a pattern of addressing God with reverence, praying for the kingdom to come, asking for the needs of each day. It's an important thing to do. Praying for the protection from the evil one, who might tempt you to be pompous and hypocrite out in the public square and looking for all sorts of attention. And of course, Jesus says to forgive others. Jesus commented on this one, and it's very important. And Jesus lets us know that earthly treasure will pass away. We need to put our treasure in a safer place. And there your heart will be. Store up treasure in heaven, not on earth. So, this is hard to do in a consumer society. This is not how we're raised or what we're taught is worthwhile. So, we need to make sure that we have our spiritual senses attuned to the right thing. That we don't succumb to the temptation of the moment to try to get others to look at us like the little kid at the pool yelling for mom, "Look at me, look at me!" But to understand that God sees what we do in private, that we shouldn't draw attention to ourselves when we're generous. But God will surely notice what we're doing and approve of it. If our spiritual eyes are healthy, we'll see a difference between the way things are done in this world and the way things are done in heaven. And at this point, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to close with a word of prayer. I'm glad you all came tonight. And after this, I'm going to be on vacation for a week, which means we won't meet next Tuesday. But after that, I promise we will be meeting every week, regularly, Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock. I look forward to it. I love this. We'll be a little bit more organized next time. Like I said, we're getting ready for vacation, so I'm a little discombobulated tonight. But let's close out with a word of prayer. I thank you all for coming this evening. I appreciate you spending some time with us here on the digital mountainside. So let's close with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for this chance to come together to grapple with the ideas that Jesus presented to us, to struggle to be better, more faithful Christians, to follow Jesus' ways rather than the ways of the world. Help us as we go forward from this place. Help us to see the world with your eyes, to hear with your ears, to love with all of your heart, and to be different, to be light and salt for other people so that we can impact the world in a different way, and that we might grow in our journey together. Protect us all as we go about our business, as we go about traveling in the world. Give us traveling mercies and bring us back together in 2 weeks so that we might do this again. So, amen. I thank you all for coming again. I wish you all the best. God bless you and keep you until we meet again. So for now, good night, goodbye.